Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all who is listening us in the live stream or maybe in the video recording. My name is Tatiana Koval, and this is podcast Happy at Work. In our podcast, we are discussing with the best international experts a topic of corporate culture, employer brand, corporate and of course employee happiness. And today, our focus is on the employer brand. And we have as a guest a very interesting and expected, from my side, are expected experts from UK, Taylor Setterfield. Hi, Taylor.
Hello, my name is Taylor. Lovely to meet you.
Taylor, usually I ask my guests to tell a little bit about themselves, and I invite all my audience to become a part of your network in LinkedIn, following you, because LinkedIn helps us to find each other, and I hope also my audience could follow you. And I know what you share your expertise. Please, could you introduce yourself?
Amazing. So my name is Taylor Setterfield. I've been in the employer branding space for just under 5 years now. I started off in the industry as an apprentice and I worked my way up. So I work in an employer branding agency. We specialize in, of course, employer branding, but also recruitment marketing and internal communications. So as I said, I started off as an apprentice. I then went into the client services side, account management, and now I am a marketing and strategy manager. So I work with individuals in their organizations at the beginning of the project to work out the strategy and the best channels, the best way to market. And then afterwards, I'll also work with them to ensure that the project's seen right through from the beginning all the way to the end. And that's bringing in insights and other bits and bobs.
Thank you. And I want to ask some of questions which I'm preparing for you. And my first question, as you said, you have a lot of experience in communications, in marketing. And what do you think, what HR can take from this area, from marketing, from communication? Why is it important to pay attention to marketing if you are working in HR?
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's crucial really for any HR position. And the reason being is that if you were to go to market with a product, of course, you'd need marketing behind it to get the product in front of people's eyes and for people to understand what the product is. And it's the exact same when it comes to HR and recruitment. So we find that with a lot of organizations that they've got this amazing corporate consumer brand, but actually when it comes to from a recruitment point of view or an employer point of view, there's a disjoint from the corporate brand compared to the employer brand. And that's why it's so important to tie in nicely with the marketing side. There's such a big window opportunity. So the company can't usually operate without the employers. So it's super, super crucial to get the right people into your organization. And you want the right people in regards to expertise, but also you want people that aren't going to leave. So in order to do that, you need to ensure that you're discovering what it is, who are you as a company, what is it that you want to put out there to market in regards to attracting talent into the organization. That is crucial because without that, you can't continue in the actual consumer corporate side of things.
If we talk about influence, the employer brand on the corporate brand, what is your opinion? Should also the public relation managers, marketing managers also work with employer brand and cooperating with HR? And maybe do you know any examples how we work with employer brand helps to improve a corporate brand, or vice versa? When the company have a poor employer brand strategy, they had some problems with the corporate brand.
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting one. And we, for example, I've spoken to Holly at Marks and Spencer's before, and which is, I don't know if everyone has it globally, apologies, but with Marks and Spencer's, it is like Tesco, Sainsbury's, it's a supermarket. well. So I've spoken to her before, and actually what happened is that everyone knows of Marks and Spencer's in the UK as a consumer brand, but nobody kind of understands what necessarily job roles are available from an employer point of view. So and they actually had quite bad reputation with certain demographics. So with the older demographics, and depending on locations, sometimes they had really bad corporate image. So people weren't applying for roles because they thought, no, don't want to work there because, it's not great. And that's really interesting. And that is why upfront strategy is so important. You need to understand what is your corporate and consumer brand. And I think it does depend on if you're a B2B company or a B2C. If you're a B2B, I don't necessarily think that your corporate brand or consumer brand is as important, because a lot of the time you're the biggest company nobody's heard of, etc. So I really do believe it depends on if you're a B2B or B2C. But there's pros and cons of having a strong corporate brand versus a weak corporate brand. For example, a company like Nike, when they go out try and get people to apply for roles, they don't have a problem with people applying for roles because they're such a big company that loads of people would love to work with. But what they did have a problem with was the amount of applications that came through that weren't relevant. So the amount of admin it took their side to actually go through, screen all of them. So that's why it's super important to really identify your core employee value proposition and understand what it is that you identify as and what you are as a company, so that you can really attract that right talent.
If we talk about promotion of the employer brand, what is your main advices? For example, you have your EVP and you start to promote your employer brand. What you as HR or any responsible person should pay attention in this moment?
Yeah, so in regards to the promotion of the EVP and employer brand in general, I would say the number one fundamental aspect to pay attention to would be to ensure that you're not just selling a dream to try and get people through to apply for roles, because we've had that before. We've worked for organizations, we've created an amazing campaign for them, they've got so many applications in, brilliant, campaign's been a success. But then 3 to 6 months later, 90% of the talent we got in are leaving because actually what they signed up for isn't reflective of the company itself. So what I would say is, you would rather, once again, attract the right talent rather than just trying to be as successful as possible, get people through the door. Because if your EVP and everything you're promoting isn't reflective of you as a company, it's actually going to be more damaging in the long run, and you're just going to be back to square one. So I think number one fundamental aspect is to do that discovery piece at the beginning, do that strategy, do focus groups with people inside your organization, get an external company to come in and do some work with you. And afterwards, depending on what it is, there's obviously so many different channels you can go down. Paid social is a great channel at the moment for recruitment purposes. But once again, you need to ensure that you stand out against your competitors on that. So many channels, you just got to find out why you're doing it, what you want to achieve, and what your success metrics are.
What is your ideas how to work with your competitors on the labor market? Should we look at them? Should we follow them? Should we take these ideas, or should we go our own way? What is your strategy when you help organization to promote the employer brand?
Mm-hmm. So I would suggest doing a competitor analysis if you have the time, whether you do it yourself or whether you get an external agency come in and do that. The reason being is exactly what you said. In regards to competitors, some people will be absolutely smashing it out the park, doing a great job. Other people might be doing things which aren't necessarily resonating with the right audience. But just because you see a competitor doing something and you're like, wow, that's amazing, really love that, doesn't actually mean that it will always be applicable to your organization as well. Because we've had it before. I've had it working with clients. They've gone, oh, our biggest competitor's doing this. We've got to do it. Love it. And I've actually turned around to them and gone, if you were to do that campaign, it wouldn't be as successful. And that's because they are such a big competitor that everyone knows who they are from a corporate point of view, employer point of view. They're a huge competitor. Whereas you need that brand awareness first before you even start touching the employer brand. So I think it's a sensible decision would be to do a competitor analysis, work out what's working, what you also like compared to competitors. But then also by doing a competitor analysis, you will identify gaps in the market. So, and that's where you can utilize that space in order to tap into that talent within the market.
Mm-hmm. Could we talk about trends, marketing trends, which we could use in employer brand management and employer brand promotion? What is the main marketing trends do you see for the next years?
I'm so sorry. Could you just repeat that? It just cut out quickly.
I want to talk about marketing trends. What the main marketing trends which we could use in employer branding this year, maybe next year too?
Yes. So I think trends in marketing, we are definitely seeing an increase in clients wanting paid social advertising, also programmatic advertising. So actually using a tool, we offer it here at Leap Create, but a tool that will use like AI technology to actually push the media spend and money behind what platforms, what ads are performing the best. I would 100% advise within any marketing that you're doing to do testing, whether that's programmatic advertising, social, whether it's literally just you do your own testing, post on social media, landing pages, whatever it may be, do as much testing as you can, because we, even in a marketing agency, we will sit here and we'll go, oh, we think this would be best, this will be best. But unless you physically have the stats to back that up, never assume. We've had it before that we almost do little bets when we go ahead with a marketing campaign. Oh, I think this creator is going to be the best. And it is so interesting to see how different it is, not just based on so many different things, so demographics, locations, the kind of experience that you're looking to hire, so many different things. So testing is definitely a thing, but so I'd say paid social, programmatic advertising. I would also say more people want things to be as easy as possible. So we're creating a lot of like toolkits for people, to just make things easier for people in-house to share and get that. And also user-generated content. So many companies are really wanting user-generated content to do with the authenticity behind it. So that would be marketing trends that I would suggest to somebody looking at which areas to focus on.
If we talk about events, is it a good tool, events online, offline? What is your suggestion for this tool for employer brand managers?
When you say events, are we talking about events to try and attract people into the company, or events for people in employer branding to upskill themselves? Which ones?
No, the first one. The events is a tool for attracting people, for promoting the employer brand, maybe for recruitment or maybe for image of the company too.
Yeah, so I would definitely say events is a great way forward. I think obviously during the pandemic, we saw a massive drop off on it for in-person events and a lot of online events, which is great. But I think now that we have we've come out the other side of the pandemic, there's a lot more in-person events and people really value that human connection that you get from actually meeting people in person. And what I'll say with that is that I think it's a great channel to go down. However, you're targeting active candidates usually at these events, which is great because they're already looking for them opportunities and certain careers. So they're going to be easier to convert. However, active candidates are only 20% of the whole pool. The other 80%, give or take, are passive candidates. So events are amazing for the active, but then you need to be doing something to attract the passive candidates as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If we talk about challenges which you face and see in the UK markets, when we talk about attracting talents, about engagement and so on, what are these challenges? What do you see?
So I think there's quite a few different challenges, particularly with tech talent. Tech talent is a very competitive industry, and unfortunately salary dependent as well. I would say definitely a massive thing for the UK market is flexible working environments. So whether that's the ability to work remotely, the ability to, lots of people with children or whatever it may be that they need to have that flexibility with. If you are not offering flexible working environments under any means, you are at a massive competitive disadvantage to larger organizations. So that's a huge challenge. I would also say we have a challenge with intergenerational workforces. So we get this quite a lot with our clients. The way that early careers and Gen Z will digest their information is so much different to the older generation of the workforce. So it's creating content that will resonate with all them demographics. So it's almost like having a kind of a matrix. You've got all these different factors and all these different challenges that you need to try and overcome. But I would say definitely take one thing at a time. So for example, if you're going to test just generic messages, generic imagery, and then go into that more granular detail. Then try test a different one for early careers people, test a different one for different locations. Don't do everything all at once, otherwise you won't actually get the insights that you're looking for.
If we talk about a different generation which could work in one particular company, and if we talk about employer brand manager, you have usually different channels from different generation, from different target audience. What is your advice how to implement a strategy? For example, at first you have to launch LinkedIn, and then you could use other challenge, or you could launch different channels in one moment because you have different audience. For example, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and so on. What is your ideas how to work with different channels with different target audience of the company?
So if you're starting from scratch, my advice would be to approach each channel with the exact same creative and the exact same messaging. The reason being is that you then want to look at the insights for that channel and actually break down. So what age demographic is interacting most with your post? Once you start getting them insights per channel, then you can create a strategy for each channel. So for example, a very sweeping statement is that TikTok is widely used with the younger demographic of audience. So early careers, perfect platform for that. That being said, you shouldn't rule it out for people over the Gen Z bracket, because we found it with some campaigns that platform's been the most successful. So it really is about trial and error. Same with LinkedIn. We'd think LinkedIn is a platform that is widely used with more experienced hires. But that being said, I've also done an early careers campaign on there, and it's been the most successful platform. So I would say from the beginning, do the exact same imagery, exact same messaging to all platforms to gather them insights. After you get that, really sit down, analyze the insights you have, and start thinking about a tailored strategy for each platform, because that's where I believe you'll get the most success. And then once you have these metrics and have these insights, you just continuously build on them. So that would be my advice.
I want to ask you, because you changed your career from marketing to employer brand. So the employer brand usually managed with the people from human resources. What is the main challenge for people from marketing who want to work with employer brand? What they should pay attention? What is the main difference for you between working in marketing and corporate brand, with corporate brand, consumer brand, and with employer brand?
Yes, so this is a really interesting question because fundamentally there are many different crossovers. However, saying that, it is working in employer branding is based on your knowledge of the industry. I think it's quite right to say that a lot of people that do end up in employer branding never intended to from when they were younger. You know, if you were to say employer branding, you go into a school and say, oh, who's considered a career in employer branding? I'm pretty sure everyone would look at you blank faced. That being said, employer branding, working within it is about your knowledge on employer branding. Like you say, it's a completely different target audience. The way that you approach things are very, very differently. However, having that marketing knowledge and expertise behind you, there's so many transferable skills between the two. It is just that knowledge that you need to build up on. Once you understand a bit more in regards to what employer branding is, what is everything that it consists of, who are the main audiences that you're trying to attract, what channels do they use, what outcomes are you trying to understand. Once you actually realize that, then I think having the marketing experience will just further benefit you. So I think there's definitely correlation between them, but they do also sit separately.
Mm-hmm. May I ask you about mistakes which you see maybe from different companies who work with the employer brand, and you understand that this is not an appropriate message, an appropriate image, and so on. What is the main mistakes you see? And I think that could be useful for people who just only start work with employer brand.
Yeah. So I think the main mistakes that people do in employer branding is and I touched upon this earlier, but is the fact that people think, right, how are we going to position ourselves to get people into our company? And usually it's like, let's be slightly different, let's be slightly quirky, let's do this. And they go to market with it, but it really isn't reflective of who they are as an organization. And 9 times out of 10, someone would much prefer you to go to market and say, you know what, we don't do flashy stuff. We do X, Y, Z, and this is what we stand for. You are much likely to get somebody that stays with you through doing that than saying, we're the best thing since sliced bread. We're this, we're that. To be genuinely honest and authentic. I think also when it comes to EVPs, working in an employer branding agency, the amount of EVPs we see, which are pretty much just very similar to each other, there's only so many different pillars and propositions you can have for every business out there. So a lot of them, there are so much crossover between them, but that's why I think it's so important not to create an EVP based on what you think people are going to want, but actually based on who you are as an organization. Because if things crop up along the way and you think, actually, this doesn't sit right with me, I don't think this is going to sit right with other people, that tells you as an organization that you fundamentally have something that you need to sort, but you're not just going to gloss it over because what do the people want? So that's what I would say people mainly mess up on.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, on our hand, about the best examples. What companies do you recommend to follow if you want to improve your skills, your knowledge in employer brand? Which companies do you really like an example of a very successful employer brand strategy?
Yeah. So there is a company called CGI. They are a business and IT consultancy company. They're once again one of the biggest companies you've never heard of, but their employer brand is really quite exceptional. They are continuously working on it to ensure that it's reflective, and I've been working with them for just under 5 years now, and I'm not just saying that because we work with them, but just generally them as a company. Over the course of the 5 years, we do so much discovery sessions. They're such a big organization that we continuously do focus groups with their members in the organization to continuously make sure that the employer brand is reflective, and to have one sweeping employer brand that's a global employer brand, so that has to apply to every single country, every single location within that country. It's hard, but I think that's why you kind of have one overarching employer, and then you tailor that, dial up and dial down the messages depending on the demographic and geographic locations. So I would really say CGI, they've done this great diversity, equity and inclusion campaign that's just been launched, which is just phenomenal. I'd really recommend for people to go watch it. It's a video and it's done from a point of view angle. So a bit like Peep Show, if anyone's watched that, but it's from the angle of the person.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it focuses on their internal thoughts and their thoughts that hold them back from necessarily going for that job interview or going for that promotion, etc. And what's really lovely is that it brings in aspects. So they focus on one man who's got ADHD and autism, and what it does is it actually overlays different voices, because that's generally what he hears inside of his head. And that was based on real insights from their actual members. So yeah, I do think CGI are doing a phenomenal job on their employer brand.
It's great. It's very, very interesting. Because my career also, like your career, started in marketing when I moved to HR. I remember what in the beginning was a lot of insights. It was a lot of things which I have never thought before. What was your main insights for the first years, maybe for the previous year in working in employer brand industry? For example, my insight was how widely companies in some particular markets, for example, in UK, and I see in Brazil, in USA, start to use employee advocacy. And never before I see what companies start to implement as a big strategy. They don't, because they usually know we have a lot of policies that restrict the employees to tell as a part of the company, and now we could see that a lot of companies start to empower their employees. It was one of the very interesting insights for me for the previous year, 2 or 3 years, I think. What is your insights from the previous year from the working in the employer brand industry?
To be completely honest with you, I was very naive going into the employer branding industry. I didn't really know what to expect. So every day really was a learning day for me. And I think the number one thing which really struck me was that prior to starting at Leap Create, I'd always felt like a cost to the company I was working for rather than an asset. So I always saw it as like I needed the job, whereas they didn't necessarily need me. I was very much replaceable. And I think when I started working in employer branding, it was a real eye-opener and a lovely eye-opener to have that actually there are so many organizations out there who genuinely do care about their employees. So that was a really rewarding aspect for me, because there are so many organizations that genuinely do care about their employees, members, what encourages them, what motivates them at work, what doesn't. And once I started to realize that, and then realize that there's so many different layers and levels to it, yeah, it's really interesting. And then also with like AI technology coming into play and just general new aspects, new tools coming into the market, there's always something to learn and understand. Obviously where you're working with people instead of necessarily products, there's always something to learn when it comes to people. So I find it a really interesting industry to work in.
This is a very interesting conversation and a lot of interesting ideas I could catch for our conversation. But I have to ask you one more, my last question, because I remember that time. I want to ask you, what is your 3 main advices to the people who want to be successful in employer brand management?
So my first bit of advice would be, and I would love to claim this as my own, but it's not. I actually listened to it on a different webinar. But my number one bit of advice would be to be strategically consistent whilst being creatively unpredictable. And what I mean by that is if you have consistency with your strategy, then amazing, wonderful, because everything needs strategy behind it. And the second part with being creatively unpredictable in such a competitive market, doesn't matter what really industry you live in, because whatever channel you're using, whether it's website, whether it's social media, whether it's at an event, you are going to need to stand out against your competitors, other people, or whatever's on the social media platform. We now live in an era where we are digesting information so rapidly and constantly that you have to stand out. If you just look the same, and that's number one issue with also employer branding, recruitment industry, is that so many people, it's just the same. It's just the same. We're just reinventing the wheel and people are doing the same campaigns. You have to do something different. You need to do something that sticks in someone's mind and they see that and they go, oh my God, that's amazing. Let me find out more. So that'd be my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice would be testing. Really and truly do as much testing as you possibly can. Find out as much information about your target audiences, your channels, your platforms, whatever you're using. Do as much learning into that platform as possible. And with that, don't try and do everything at once. So don't try and test, I'll put 10 different copy options out there and see which one resonates best with all different imagery. No, you need to change one factor at a time. So if you're changing the copy, let the imagery stay the same. If you're changing the imagery, let the messaging stay the same. See what, otherwise it's an unfair test. And my third bit of advice would be to continuously improve what you do. This is a big one, actually. So majority of our clients that we used to get here at Lead Create would come to us and be like, hi, I need a website done, or I need a social post done. Give us a brief, we'll do it, send it off, done. Now we take a much more proactive response rather than reactive. So they'll come to us with a request. We work in like a 5-phase approach. So number one is the discovery phase. That's when we'll do our focus groups, do our primary and secondary research, find out as much insight as we can. We'll then move into our concept development phase. Within that, we look, right, how are we going to look and feel different when we go out to the market and grab people's attention? We then move into the content creation phase. That's creating the landing page, social assets, event banners, whatever the assets may be, that will be that. We then move into go-to-market. So that's pushing everything live. Making sure, so job adverts, website, social posts, events, whatever it may be, pushing everything live. And then we move into reporting and optimization. So that's when we look at actually the analytics behind everything. What's working well, what's not working so well. And then why is that? Like, not just giving the data, but why has that one performed better? Why has that location responded better to that? And then we make optimizations to everything that we do or recommendations to the client. And then it feeds back into that circle. So you're continuously developing. Don't just go out with a campaign and hope for the best. You've got to continuously be working on it to ensure that you really are reaching their maximum results. And yeah, I think that's my 3 bits of advice.
I think this is absolutely excellent advice. It's so interesting, a very interesting conception of a finger. Taylor, thank you for our conversation. Thank you for investing your time, for sharing your knowledge, your expertise for my audience. I want to say that it was Taylor Setterfield from BK, and one of the best experts who bring her market expertise into employer branding. And I strongly recommend to follow Taylor on LinkedIn, and because she is open to share her thoughts with everyone in this area. Thank you for your time. It was the podcast Happy at Work. And I hope it was insightful and useful for all the people who are starting and continue to follow our podcast. Thank you and have a good day, evening, or night.
Thanks, everyone.